Well, hello, friends. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. It's good to be with you. Hi, I'm Scott. I'm one of the founders of Changing Work, and today we are here to talk about self-awareness and our new book that has just come out this week, Leading with Self-Awareness. Yay! We have a few of our authors here to talk about it. But before we do, just a little bit of who we are and context setting. So Changing Work was started to change work from the inside out, meaning to make work a more humane place, a more compassionate place, while still being profitable and all those things. Another way of saying it's a place that's designed to help bring a higher state of consciousness to the workplace. And so we have a community. You can find us at changingwork.org, and we'd love to have you be part of our world. We have this project. This is the first of many, I hope, but our first book, Leading with Self-Awareness, with the idea is that we would write it together as community. The idea that not any one of us has the corner or all the information about conscious business or about self-awareness or any of these topics, really. And so we have, in this case, 25 authors from our community. Each wrote a chapter about their own experience building their self-awareness. And we started with self-awareness because self-awareness is often the first building block in our journey towards compassion or broader awareness. Especially if we're thinking about being a leader at work, self-awareness is often where we start. A leader that starts by doing their own development starts with self-awareness, meaning they'll go through a 360 process, or they'll do a personality test like Myers-Briggs or Enneagram. So anyway, we hope that these stories will be of use to the world and bring more light to the world. So there we go. There's the context. So I'd like to welcome Wilder, Matt, and Quentin. Hello, my friends. Good to be with you. And Wilder, let's start with you. You know what? I'm going to read, well, if I can find it real fast, I'm going to read your bio from the book because, that
Okay,
seems like a good place to start. How does that sound?
that sounds great.
You can find Wilder right here. Okay, let's see if I get it right here. Wilder hopes to bring more aliveness to people, teams, and organizations, working at the intersection of experience design, master facilitation, rites of passages, and human consciousness. Wilder works with clients that range from educational institutions to biotech, fintech, and ag startups to multinational companies. She's a co-founder and CEO of Intune Collective, a business strategy and human development consultancy based in San Francisco. Her life's work is to help people and organize, evolve, flourish, and embody their core purpose. That sounds pretty
Embodiment.
good.
Hmm. Bios are so interesting, aren't they?
They are. I'm sure you wrote that a while ago. Does it still ring true for you? Does it sound like what you're doing?
Mostly true. It feels a little like heavy on the this is who I work with piece because that's always evolving and changing, right? But I think
Sure.
the modality of like self-awareness, embodiment, having more tools to stay regulated and present gives people what they're yearning for and gives organizations what is sorely needed right now.
Yeah, I
Mm.
love that. And what's your ideal when you work with people, when you work with organizations, what do you hope that they achieve?
Mm. I hope that as individuals we can drop in and connect on a one-on-one basis where like there's a felt sense of the other, right? And that creates an opening into dropping the defenses, dropping the pattern behaviors, and dropping the conditioned tendencies where you need to either fight, flight, freeze, or appease, and move into like what's possible if I can drop all that and just like relax with this other
Mm,
person or relax with my team so that we can ideate better, plan better,
mm.
execute better.
I love that. Imagine a world where we ideated better, executed better, but also had that connection with each other. That's pretty good. Have you seen that in action?
I have. I'm trying to keep it simple too when I work with people. So the through line is really 70% of business problems are misdiagnosed business problems. They're actually human dynamics or human developmental problems. And
Mm,
I've seen it in action where I was able to take a team that had some trauma embedded in the storytelling of the founding of the organization. And it was moving along as they were hiring a new CEO, a new executives joining the executive team, and so they need to kind of reground and make sense of the history and move on.
Mm,
And we were able to do that through ritual, like have them honor the past and tell the stories of the past and see themselves in the past, but then harvest whatever wisdom they wanted. And then we put a line in the sand, so to speak, in the room that they're working in and crossing over. And in the crossing over, there's like a breath of fresh air where they were sensing like, oh, there is a future that we can co-create together that doesn't have to be so heavy and linked to the past. We can actually let go of some things and feel a little lighter.
mm.
So,
I love that.
mhm.
All right. Well, I'm gonna come back to you and we'll talk about the story you wrote and why you wrote it. But before that, I want to introduce Quentin. Hi, Quentin, or Q as I call him.
Hello, hello.
Quentin, would you prefer that I read your bio, or would you like to speak from the heart about, who Q is in the world?
Bio's a good place to start
Let's do it. All
because
right.
mine is from my heart. So,
Oh yeah, love it. All right. Well, Quentin Finney is a human, a father, a best-selling author, international certified mindfulness teacher, member of the Forbes Coaches Council, and longtime meditation practitioner. After holding operational and executive leadership roles with organizations like Google and EMC and startups, he spent the last decade consulting and coaching, helping others as they discover the inner wisdom they don't always recognize they have. And he firmly believes that we're just not meant to do any of this alone. Yeah, I
that's
like
me.
Mhm.
that. Um, what's the favorite thing about the work that you're doing, Quentin?
Um, you know, I think there are different kinds of coaching modalities. There are ways to coach people into a process, and there are ways to coach people into relating with other things that are happening. I'm less focused on process, more focused on what I typically refer to as like depth and presence-based coaching. It's like,
Hmm.
how do we be together? And how do we be together when our minds are telling us stories about things that are going on,
Hmm.
and those stories are not always very accurate? And so, like, how
Hmm.
do we relate to one another in the presence of stories that might not be telling us the truth about what's happening?
Hmm. I sense a common theme here. A
Imagine
common
that.
theme about building awareness and starting with self-awareness. Beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. Learning to recognize the stories that we have inside of ourselves and like poke just a little.
Yeah.
Like, is that really true? You
Yeah.
know,
I love it.
not be guided by it.
I love it. All
Yeah.
right. And now I want to introduce Matt McLaughlin. And I'm going to go ahead and, read his bio here. So Matt McLaughlin has over 25 years of experience building high performance teams and leaders, and with specialties in fostering emotional intelligence, self-awareness, and communication skills. Matt helps CEOs, founders, managers, and leaders increase their impact on people, planet, and profit. He has experience in a wide range of industries, including nonprofits, tech, pharmaceuticals, etc. And from new managers to tenured CEOs, Matt partners with leaders of all levels to achieve their full potential. Hi, Matt.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Scott.
That is awesome. Matt, when you're helping people achieve their full potential, what does that look like? What kind of things do you see change in them?
It's really getting out of our own way. Um, I, you know, the common theme being the stories we tell ourselves, and that's a lot around that potential. It can be we're not good enough, we're not ready for the role, all of these things, and or we need to be somebody other than who we are, and
Hmm.
we can really learn to lean into what we're really good at, our strengths and our core and our authenticity. That's more than enough.
Hmm. Beautiful. So this process that we've all been through in writing a book, let's see. Matt, while you're here, let's start with you. Why did you want to get involved? Why did you want to write a book? What was and how was it like for you?
Um, well, I've always been a writer. That's going back to like grade school. I've
Hmm.
always enjoyed it. I've always enjoyed reading. A large part of what I do with my own marketing is blogs. And the book thing has always been one of those like someday things. It's been in the bucket list. I worked for a publisher for a number of years too. So the chance to do that was really exciting for me, and to not have to go at it alone, that it was, we could rely on the experience and wisdom. There's a few people that have published before that are part of this, and the expertise that we brought in with the editors and the publicists, fantastic. The experience itself was amazing. I thought going through some of the revisions and some of the process there was really, really illuminating for me. And I found I had to really stretch to hit the, I think we were around 2,000 words. That felt like a lot at a certain point, and needing to go dig a little deeper.
Yeah.
For a lot of that.
Yeah, cool. So Wilder, you wrote a story, a chapter titled Unbound. Could you tell us a little bit about why you chose that and what was that about for you?
I feel like my own personal self-development journey started with like a visceral sense in my body of constraining, stress, and everything that I've done, whatever modalities I tapped into, was to try to find some relief within so that I could, again, back to that relaxation or the sense of peace and calm. And along the way, I discovered that I had a great grandmother who had bound feet. And so I brought that cultural aspect into it because I remember the moment that I found her shoes and I put two and two together, and that we were both alive at the same time. And just through time and centuries, we are bound by different things, whether it's physical, emotional, familial, cultural, societal, economics, right? And so all of that is, what would it be like if humans, if I could learn to unbind myself. 1 second.
Yeah, sometimes we live in a world that is ripe with distraction. Even when we're trying to do our best to monotask, we're always in a
the other
world.
room that just went off. So it's just really feeling like what are the tools and the recipe for moving towards freedom, and in a way kind of liberating myself, and I'm using like feminist language here, but liberating myself and my lineage a little bit as I do that process.
Could you maybe share for some of us that are less familiar with the foot binding process and what that was all about? And then how, kind of what parallels metaphorically that has to your own life?
Yeah, it's a status choice to put young girls' feet around the age of 5 or 6, when they're, before their bones are fully growing, into shoes about this size, right? Like it literally fits in the palm of your hand. And so as they go through adolescence and into young adulthood, the bones like don't form normally, and they form to the shape of the shoe, and it becomes so that they can't walk normally. And so it's a way to keep women within the family. And the words kept women, like literally is what that is about. And so the other forms of binding that can happen is just all the voices that Quentin was talking about in our heads, the stories that we absorb, the musts and shoulds of how work looks and how one's life looks, especially in the United States, but I know it's a global phenomenon, right? And so inherently, we're all diverse and unique, but society is not structured to make room for that diversity in a very real way. And yet as individuals, we yearn to be seen and acknowledged for our uniqueness. And so there's a dissonance in there that fights itself and will be seen in behaviors that show up as poor communication, projection, lack of repair, things that we see as like dynamics that are pretty common.
So what are the skills that each one of us can build to kind of unbind ourselves from the stories we're telling or the constructs that society or work is putting on us? What are the skills? How do we break out?
I think self-awareness is so key, right? It's like where are the things that are triggering me what context, because just because we have a trigger, it doesn't mean that we carry it forward to all contexts. And then finding a skill and tool that you want to practice over time, so you maintain some level of consistency so that it becomes second nature to override the hijacking of our amygdala in the moment, where we say things and do things that we don't intend to, right?
Mm.
Small but important places to start.
I love it. And you're demonstrating it beautifully as you have distractions in your house.
My big dog, Maslow, wanting attention.
Oh, I know it's a challenge. And you're well done for demonstrating how to maintain composure even while the world is very distracting around us. So, Quentin, I'm going to move to you for just a second. So, you wrote a chapter called Perfectly Good Enough about your own relationship with perfection. Um, Talk about being bound by something. Tell us more about your relationship with perfection or your relationship with good enough.
Yeah. Just to play on for a moment the the stories about what we have to do and what's perfect and when something is triggering because it's less than what we think, and like a dog barks in the background or a phone rings while we're on a call. A few years ago, I was working with recruiters at Google because we were preparing to do a resume writing workshop for veterans. And I was helping them understand, like, here's how you translate the veterans experience into corporate speak and whatever. And my son crept around the screen and like photobombed while we were doing the session. And he's 15 now. He was probably 5 at the time. Um, and of course, I felt a little triggered and we had a good laugh about it and we moved on. But like the stories in my head were like, that shouldn't have happened, and feeling in my body the triggering aspect of it. But the feedback was that was such a good session and it was so human and it was not the story in my head. Right. And so it was just a really good opportunity to relate to, like, what is our perspective on perfection and how do we relate to knowing when something is actually good enough? And like
Hmm.
I had this belief early career for real, deep belief that I had to be perfect at everything I touched or I didn't have any value in the workforce.
Hmm.
Right. So every single thing that I touched, I felt driven to be perfect at. And it creates this really intense situation where at some point you face a brick wall called either I'm going to suffer like this forever or I'm not going to do anything because then I don't feel the pressure to be perfect, or I'm going to do something different. And so stepping into like understanding, okay, I don't have to be perfect at everything. That relentless pursuit of perfection actually masks my magic,
Hmm.
right? Because it limits my ability to focus on the things that are my real strengths and gifts and bring those into the world while I'm trying to be perfect at things that I'm probably never going to be that great at. Like
Hmm.
you have a guitar on the back of your wall. I have a guitar right over there. I can't play for anything, right? So I don't have to be perfect at it. It's just something I enjoy sometimes, pick
Hmm.
it up and strum. And that's okay too, right?
For sure. I wonder, do you think it's possible to learn this just by thinking through it? Or is it one of these things where life is the only teacher and you have to experience the brick walls, experience the pain?
Yeah. You know, I remember this is young and we used to say, why do bulldogs have flat noses? Well, because they chase parked cars, right? And eventually they're going to catch the car and it's going to flatten their nose. And so like some of life experience can feel like that too. And I think the real opportunities are, especially as we climb the ranks, we allow less and less interaction with others. And we're mirrors for one another, right? And so, like,
Hmm.
allowing myself to be seen and receive the reflection back that I've done something that's good,
Hmm.
right? And then staring that story in my head in the face that says something different and then having somebody to work with like a coach or a mentor or a kind grandmother or someone in my corner to help create that shift. It's important and it's liberating. And I don't know that we get there. I'm sure there are people who get there on their own. I was not one of them.
Mm,
I needed the support and reflection of others to get there myself. And so now the
beautiful.
way I think about it is giving back,
Yeah.
right?
This type
Yeah.
of unbinding, being
Hmm.
unbound by the stories. This is such a strong theme, the stories we tell. It reminds me of a Mark Twain quote or ditty. Mark Twain said, "I've lived through a lot of terrible things in my life, some of which actually happened." And that's kind of what we're talking about is these stories we tell us. But
Yeah.
Quentin, I'm imagining, let's you do this work with other people now. Let's say you have a client that is a perfectionist or a trying to be recovering perfectionist.
Yep.
I'm imagining that there is a bit of a challenge because probably that sense of perfectionism is what has made them amazing at a certain set of things. And then they're finding some things where it starts to, it's not so amazing. How do you work with them to tell the difference, right? To hold on to the good, but let go of the part that's not serving them any well.
Yeah, that's a really strong and powerful question, actually. And I believe in strong and powerful questions, so I'm glad for that. Sometimes it's just a matter of asking good, wicked questions, like, where do you think that perception that you're holding comes from? What's the story that tells you that you have to be perfect like that? What's the story that defines for you what perfection is?
Hmm.
Right. And then sometimes just little maxims that I'm fond of dropping are things like just reminding them that, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should.
Hmm.
Right. And I think that's a struggle with delegation in particular, because we feel like things have to be perfect. And if I'm leading the team and I feel responsibility for the output, I want the perfect output. Yeah, I still have to let them deliver to their skills and magic,
Hmm.
not my level of perfection. So I need to allow them not to do it the way I would do it, which means I
Hmm.
need to see the story in my head,
Hmm.
and I need to allow them to define what good enough is and not drive toward perfection.
Hmm.
So in startups, we say launch and iterate.
Right. Well, those questions that you mentioned, those seem like all good ways to build our self-awareness. And it occurs to me that as we're building our self-awareness of our own traits, like perfection or the rules we've been bound by or the stories we're telling in our head, once we get better at that, it occurs to me that then we're better at seeing other people as well, realizing that, oh, they're also going through a mess or, going through whatever and may not be exactly the same as mine.
Yeah. Yeah. This life school.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to shift gears to Matt. Matt wrote a chapter called From Panic Attacks to Self-Discovery. Matt, can you tell us a little bit about your journey from panic attacks to self-discovery?
Yeah, absolutely. This all started about 25 years ago. I was in a pretty good career rise during the dot-com boom and kind of started to realize like, okay, you got the American dream. We had just bought a house. Career was taking off. And then it was like, well, started realizing how fragile all that was. And what if it falls apart? What if I never get a job with that kind of meteoric income and career growth, honestly? Like I got this. I was lucky to get this. I'll never get this again. A lot of imposter syndrome and scarcity, and it all just snowballed. And eventually I got to the point I was having debilitating panic attacks, like not leaving the house, staying under a blanket kind of stuff. Real dark visits to the ER, terrible. And my journey through that started with some some meditation work with a therapist, and that was really the impetus for starting to look at some of these beliefs and ways that we can learn to watch our thoughts like they're on a movie screen with objectivity and identifying these patterns and then deconstructing them. So For me, it was a blend of meditation and cognitive behavioral techniques that got me through it. And over the years, that's been what I have brought to my work with other people.
These panic attacks, that sounds kind of debilitating. And it sounds like it was based on fear or loss or, the potential of loss. Could you talk more about like where did these things come from?
Right. It's basically our mind. It's a natural body function. So a panic attack is your body preparing for a life or death, fight for my life situation. Great when we were evolving so we could fight bears. Not so good when it's a project due at work or a touchy boss or and it's an old part of our brain. When that gets triggered, it says, this is it. We got to fight for our life. So there's all kinds of chemistry that goes on, changes with our heart rate, the way we perceive things. It's terrifying. If you don't know what it is, it feels like a heart attack. You can't breathe. You got to run, but you don't know where. Really, really brutal. But it's that normal bodily function being triggered in an abnormal way.
So it sounds like one of the first steps is to realize like, oh, I'm not broken. Like this is normal Homo sapien or human behavior. This is my physical body. And then you talked about a little bit, could you share a little bit more of the antidote and maybe go into a bit more detail, or if you even want to demonstrate something?
Yeah, for panic attacks in particular, the way through it is you get to a point where, for me anyway, I stopped caring whether I had one. So a lot of that spiral, you fear the fear. And as soon as you start having some feelings of anxiety, and for some people that's a heartbeat increases or our thoughts start spiraling. And then your body imprints the panic attack itself as the life or death situation. And when you fear the fear at that level, you just get caught in this terrible spiral. So the way through it is, one, recognizing, okay, this is a normal bodily function. And I always have people like, go get checked out, get your blood work done. Now we know, all right, it's a panic attack. And slowly working into some triggers. And I would put myself in the most triggering situations I could think of and just sit with it.
You would do it on purpose? Is that what you're saying?
On purpose. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm imagining some of our listeners and maybe me too saying, wait, what? So
Yeah.
could you share some examples of what that looks like?
Yeah.
Like, are you out standing in front of a train, waiting for playing chicken?
Nothing that bad. A lot of my triggers were around sitting at the gate at an airport. And for everybody, it's different, right? Typically, it's something where you don't really have a good escape route. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of noise, congestion. And this was back in the day before security was so tight at airports. But yeah, I literally went and sat at the gate and just did all the things, thinking through the what ifs and working through all of that, letting those feelings come and go. Because panic attacks usually 15, 20 minutes and your body re-regulates the chemistry and it passes. So just like our thoughts, our emotions, they come and go, they change, they're impermanent.
Is there a set of self-talk or self-messages that you use or might recommend, when you're starting to feel like that?
Yeah, I think a lot of this comes down, a lot of the self-awareness is how is this showing up for me? And for everybody, the experience is a little different. And telling yourself what's going on physiologically, reminding yourself of that. There are specific breathing techniques that are fantastic for working in the moment. Most people, once they've learned that they can get through this a little bit, it doesn't get back to that point. The anxiety may be there, and we all go through that, but it doesn't get to that intense panic experience.
I have more questions, but friends, if you're listening, watching live, go ahead and throw in the chat if you have any questions. I would love to ask Wilder. Wilder in her chapter talks about her learning about somatic techniques. And for those of us that maybe aren't as familiar with what that means or what it entails, what's the benefit of somatic?
Yeah. I mean, it pulls on what everyone else has been sharing, Matt and Quentin, and the triggers that come up. We can learn to recognize what it feels like in our body to be triggered, and then to slow down and have a practice where you can intentionally create a pause between the trigger and then the response. So, for example, there's actually an exercise that I wrote about called center. It's called grab, center, face. And this comes from the Strozzi Institute in Petaluma, California, which is that you're grabbed by something and you feel all the physiological responses in your body. And then you center yourself, like whatever grounding practice, a quick meditation, reconnection to the breath, so that you are re-regulating yourself back to calm. And then you face whatever that pressure was, whatever that trigger was, with a new way to respond, rather than that conditioning of like, I have to spit out an answer right now, or I have to apologize right now, because there's more depth to the response when you have a chance to kind of integrate it.
That's awesome. Any other, so could you summarize that one more time, the 3 steps?
It's grab. So grab or trigger, right? You get
Yep.
and then center,
Uh-huh.
and then face.
Grab, center, face. Beautiful. And what is it about this? Like, why does it work? Why does the somatic process work versus whatever we were doing before as Homo sapiens?
I think it really just gets at the heart of those physiological responses to really map your own body and map your feelings and your emotions, your range, so that then you can stretch your capacity to hold complex situations. And the whole goal of it is to get us into a more responsive mode. But that takes practice over time. So there's a lot of different practices that you can use to just get at that same thing of awareness in the body. And then over time, you develop a new shape. You know, you might see people with rounded shoulders. Well, there's probably some story about being beaten up or gaslit or scapegoated, and then you wear that over time. And so how do you stand back up in your dignity or in your vertical length, where you are holding space for yourself, so that as a leader or a parent, you can hold space for other people?
Beautiful. So kind of that self-awareness in this case, it starts with understanding what's going on with my body, my physiological response, how that's tied to my mind, and being able to not exactly control it, but understand it and be able to operate in ways that calm that down and allow me to be more effective.
I call my somatic sensing my business partner.
Ah,
Like
nice.
I go into it and I partner with it as a way to, like, there's just more information here. It's a sounding board for where I'm at or what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling.
Beautiful. All right. So while we have you, one of our guests asked, what surprised you most in your writing process, or perhaps even in the journey that you've gone through as you're doing this self-reflection?
Wow, I feel like I've carried around ideas in my head for so long, and I think it's easy to write them and get them out. But I discovered a process where I started just voice memo recording myself, and just I realized I'm more oral than I am going straight to paper. And that, like, let me see myself. And from there, I was able to shape it in draft format in writing a little bit better. It felt more liberating than to have to face a blank sheet and start from scratch for me.
That's a good process. And what about, so that's a good process about learning how to be a writer. Beautiful for all of us. I also find it true. It's a lot easier to edit something than it is to start with a blank sheet of paper.
Yeah.
What about, you probably had some level of expertise already in the subject that you're talking about. That's probably why you chose it. But did it deepen your own understanding of it by having to get it down and think about it and write it and fine tune it? So what was your personal journey like in your learning?
Yeah. I was appreciative of the constraint, right? Like 2,000 words really forced me to choose like what is salient. How do I say it in a way that is as direct for the reader as possible and is like interesting of a story? Like, how do I meld those two together? And I think that shows up in how we lead anyway. And for me, it's working with clients. It's how do I make it compelling for them so people can drop in. One thing that as a writer I've learned in the past is just in media res, which is the concept of dropping right into the middle of the action. And I think a lot of times when we're leading or in meetings, we have so much storytelling that goes around the context and we're justifying and being accountable. Whereas what would happen if we just like parachuted right into the middle of the action and got to the point
Mm.
and then had dialogue around that?
Mm.
And so,
I like that as a technique. That's good.
yeah, so it's a way of jumping into what's important.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. I'm going to bring Quentin back on and ask him about his own journey in the writing process. He's talking about perfection. And for a perfectionist or perhaps a recovering perfectionist, how was the writing process for you? Because it's hard to write a perfect 2,000 words.
Yeah, yeah, perfect. So I think in terms of story, uh, and so, the movie The Last Samurai comes to mind. Katsumoto, one of the main characters, is contemplating this poem, and he's contemplating a poem about cherry blossoms. And at the end of his life, late in the movie, almost at the very end of the movie, with his last breath, he reflects, "Oh, perfect. They're all perfect, just like they are, right? They're all perfect." And so coming to that place is kind of challenging. It looks good on a big screen. Um, and it's not the first time that I wrote. Last time I wrote about ageism and power dynamics in a multi-generational workforce, which was about something that was happening around me. And even though I do share some of my own stories in that, this time I wanted to write about something that was happening within me and that I don't think I have a lock on the market with. And so, you know, one of the things that I mentioned for sure is just a tip, don't plan for ideal conditions. It's like I live and die by my calendar, and I would block time on my calendar for writing, and then my son would be sick, and I would have to go pick him up and bring him home from school, and I would lose the time that I had to write. And so it really was, I would say the most powerful part of the experience for me was realizing like, oh yeah, I'm still in it, right? Like this pull or impulse or drive toward perfection isn't really something that's conquerable in the sense that I'm done with it. It's like writing about perfectionism was a really powerful, strong, present reminder that I'm actually still in it. I have to relate to it. I need to be aware of it. It affects how I move through the world. And yet, it's good enough, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Feels like it's probably like everything else, an ongoing journey, right?
Yeah.
It seems like there's not a time when we climb the mountain and we cross the finish line and throw our hands in the air and go, hey, I'm done. I'm fully good. Like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
there's more. There's more.
Yeah. And the one thing that I sometimes just reflect on is like I feel an allergy to claiming expert,
Mm.
even as it relates to myself. When there's an argument to be made that I'm the expert of myself, if nothing else. But for me, that feels like when I stick that stake in the ground that I'm an expert, it means I don't have anything left to learn. And
Mm.
I don't believe that, even about myself, right? Like I can tell you all about me now and past, but now and future is still emerging.
For
And so
sure.
I'm still learning, and I don't claim expert. I just claim student.
Well, I do believe that you're the worldwide expert in being you, but you're not done. You're not
No,
done
not done.
learning about who you is. It seems like that's the whole point of our journey of self-awareness is there's a continuous unfolding.
For sure. And it was
Probably
a
because
powerful
each one of us
reminder.
are changing all the time too, right?
Changing. And, you know, it's like I remember the original I Am campaign that was I Am Cisco, right? Which was a long time ago. I have enough white in my beard to be able to remember that. Um, but now we say I am changing work, and this is completely different. Yes, I am part of changing work, but I am also changing work,
Yeah.
changing the way that work happens in the world and changing it because I'm changing myself.
Yeah, that's right.
right? And so, yeah, the journey unfolds and continues.
That's right. Yep. Okay, you triggered my favorite Rumi quote, so that's my Rumi quote, which it took 42 minutes for me to get this long. So my quote is yesterday I was clever and I tried to change the world. Today I'm wise and I'm working on changing myself.
Yep.
And when we're talking about changing work, from the inside out, that's what we mean. We're talking about each one of us as we develop, as we grow in consciousness. Of course, we change, but by definition, that then changes all of the systems we belong to, including the workplace.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to thank you, Quentin. I'm going to ask Matt about his experience with the writing. And, Quentin, Matt, Wilder, if you have questions for each other, let's hear those too. You can ask them live too. But Matt, what was your experience like, dealing with these self voices, dealing with the inner talk? What was it like to write about that and the journey you went on in the process of writing this book?
In terms of some of the panic stuff and
Just your own journey. Like maybe you were done with the panic stuff or maybe like, oh, I discovered there's more here. Like, was it a continuous learning process for you?
Yes, it was. And while I thought I had kind of unearthed a lot of what was going on, and like I said, it was a while ago, and I feel like I've processed a lot of it. But as going back through like some journals and notes and stuff, it was like, wow, some of this is still unresolved, and maybe it always will be. I think that's part of being human. There's always, I like to say, it's the onion, peeling the onion layer. There's always more, and then there's always more tears as you peel an onion too. So that comes with it.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was revisiting a lot of that was wow. And then looking back on, and actually, I'm going to piggyback with Todd's question here. Looking at the things that I did to get through it, and then how I work with other people to get through it. It's a constant reminder of it's self-therapy, really, where I have to stop myself sometimes and say, well, you really got to listen to what you're sharing with your clients and pay attention, because, all right, maybe at the moment I haven't had a sitting meditation practice regularly for a couple months now, and it's okay. I got to get back to that. Physical exercise, sunlight, like it's a constant check. It's a constant reminder for me to keep doing the things that I need to do.
Beautiful. One of the things that happened in the building of this book, we have 25 authors, each talking about the topic of self-awareness. And one of the members of our community reached out and said, oh, this is what the Quakers do. And I said, what? Really? What? Tell me more. And he said, well, the Quakers have this relationship with the divine that is more like a question. And so they write to deepen their own individual understanding of the divine. And they write together so they have a deeper understanding as a group. And then they use that writing as a way to have conversations collectively, but then outside of their community as well. And I thought, oh, this is exactly what we're doing. Because none of us have all the answers about self-awareness. Nobody in the world does. I imagine the 25 of us all sitting around a circle, sitting around a fire, and each one of us has a limited view of the fire, but with all of us together, you get an expanded view. So I want to thank the three of you for contributing to our collective wisdom around self-awareness. All right, friends, any other questions? Oh, let's see. Linda asks, love to hear more about what was done to build community among the authors. It's a great question. Well, I'll start, and I'd love to hear from the three of you, but we created this community both online and virtual like this, and sometimes in person as well, called Changing Work. And we also put authors into groups of 4 or 5 so they could self-organize and have peer buddies, writing buddies. We had bi-weekly meetings where we're meeting together with a writing coach in the beginning and later a marketing coach. And all of those meetings were a chance to build more collaboration and build more connection between folks. But I'd love to hear from Matt, Wilder, Quentin, what your experience was like in terms of doing this as community.
I think I was all in when I went to the first meeting led by you and Nick around you said we're here to change work, but we know we can't do it alone, right? That was such a powerful statement and invitation that I don't hear very often from many places. And it's so humble and it's so true and it's so effective. And so the writing process to me just symbolized like the actualization of that. And so Quentin and I were actually in the same small groups, and we met for fun. We met to read each other's writings and give feedback. We met to talk about the process and clarify questions. And I feel like there's these friendships and future collaborations that will emerge over time. And then I love that.
Woo! Hard to control.
I'm going to pass. I'll be right back.
Okay. Quentin or Matt, do you like to pick up where she left off? She said, I love, and then, you say it.
I will, if you don't mind, Matt. I think Matt mentioned that he'd had an aspiration to write a book. So had I for a while. And it even was on my individual development plan for a few years before, when I was still in the corporate workforce. And, there are some people who can do this on their own. Scott, you are a shining example of that with your book. It felt intimidating. It felt like a lot. And at one point, I was privileged to be a fly on the wall with somebody who was interviewing with a senior editor at Barrett Kohler. And, the point for me there was listening to the story that the editor was sharing. He'd been there for like 35, 40 years. And he said he gets 20,000 submissions a year and he picks 50. And every little bit of anxiety that I had felt at that point about trying to do anything like this on my own was magnified, was just amplified. I was like, not only is that intimidating, but I don't want to do it by myself. I want to do it with other people. I want to like share the experience and work together in community. And so for me, like the aspect of coming together, yes, we had our pod set up at the monthly Author Connect calls. We rotated, random breakouts so that everybody had an opportunity for months to connect with every other author at some point, whether it was in a pod or in a breakout, in our Connect calls or coaching call with our editor for writing. It was like, there really wasn't a moment when I felt like I was stuck doing this alone. And for me, that was the ticket. I was like, oh, good, because I won't say that I can't do it alone, but I really didn't want to do it alone. And I didn't have to. So I got to share it, and that was wonderful. So
that is beautiful. I love it. Yeah, it's the old African proverb, right? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, to go together.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Ubuntu.
Ubuntu. Yeah.
Mhm.
Matt, anything else to add on that question?
Yeah, it was really interesting that and for me, I knew at least half of the authors outside of the book. So other programs, connections, so on and so forth. So it felt very friendly and open and safe. And also like, these are some of my closest people. And I don't want to disappoint, right? I want to do my best here and really dig in and show up and do a good job for this. So that was really exhilarating. And I thought what changing work provided in terms of the infrastructure, and I know Quentin had a big part to play in that. That was enormously supportive. The coaching calls, the updates, the small groups, we have our own little cohort within the collective. All of that was amazing. So there's a ton of support.
Beautiful. Fantastic. Let's see. All right, friends. Any other questions? Questions for each other?
I would like to hear the end of I love.
from Wilder.
You can laugh too. My dog's name is actually Maslow. And he needed his say. I love that there's a like it's walking the talk here, like the community building and the intentionality. You can just port over to other projects within a team, a cross-functional team, a newly launched team, and then just follow the roadmap of this process, which I know is a beautiful intention of changing work that really, really inspires me. Is like, how can we invent the ways that community building, that inspired collaborative work can actually launch, take root, and sustain itself? Like, I'm watching and wanting to be a part of that because it's so generative and it feels really good, and the relationships are real and it's so much fun.
Beautiful. Thank you. Well, as we move to kind of close here, first, thank you all. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you for contributing your wisdom around self-awareness. Wilder, while we have you here, where can people find you?
LinkedIn is the best place to find me. And so I'm on there as Wendy Hornbrower. Wilder Hornbrower is there. And I can also be found at intunecollective.com.
Intunecollective.com. Very good. And Matt, how about you? How do people find you?
LinkedIn's a great place. Also, my website is illustracoaching.com, ELUSTRA coaching.com.
Maybe you can both throw it in the chat there. And Quentin, how about you? How can people find you?
I think that LinkedIn is the best way to find me, mostly because other things will change. I update my website, or I'm going to launch I'm actually already launched a Substack, but I'll use LinkedIn to point to all of that. So that's the great central place to connect with me, is on LinkedIn.
Yep, very good. And I see, Linda, this chat, Matt actually did answer that question without reading the question out loud. He answered the question earlier, but thank you for the reminder. That's good. And for everyone listening, if you're interested in joining our movement, come one, come all, you can find us at changingwork.org. We have 3 communities. We started with a community for, we would call it practitioners, people who are coaches and consultants and whatnot, who are doing the work of conscious business, because we wanted to help them be more successful. We thought that would be like a multiplying effect in the world. And now, over the next couple of weeks, we're launching a community for people leaders and a community for individual contributors or professionals. And so you can find it all on changingwork.org. If you're interested in writing a book with us, we are in the process of writing book number 2 as a community. We're getting ready to kick off the process for book number 3. So if you're interested in writing a book with us, join the collective, you'll join the community, you'll find out more. But you can also reach out directly, hello@changingwork.org, or you can find me, I'm Scott, at changingwork.org. Whew, beautiful. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining. Thank you for being part of my community, and have a beautiful rest of your day. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.